associate professor at the University of Florida. So in addition to being an associate professor, I have a couple of leadership roles within the program. One of them is the counselor education program coordinator, and then I also am the coordinator for our doctoral program. I have a 2-2 teaching load typically, which means I teach 2 classes in the fall and 2 classes in the spring. So as far as research, so University of Florida is a Research 1 institution, or high intensive research, the highest level of research classification that you can have. So there is a lot of emphasis, a lot of focus on research. And so I would say probably about 40 to 50% of my time is supposed to be spent on research. So about half time on teaching, 50%, I would say probably about 40 to 45% on research, and then about 5 to 10% on service. I would say the biggest opportunities that I have is there are a lot of opportunities for research. Yes, I can choose what I want to study, what I want to do research on, and what that looks like for me. A lot of my research is with children and adolescents, and so I might be in the school a couple of days a week, or meeting with school administrators, kids, and doing groups or collecting data out in the field, and that's fine. I can work that into my schedule, and so the flexibility I have in my job is really great to be able to do that. Other opportunities in being at a Research 1 institution are just endless when it comes to research. There are a lot of resources at UF, opportunities for collaborating across areas, which is really important in research and trying to go off external funding. There are a lot of resources within the college that we have to help support teaching. And so I would say that's a strength as well. A great challenge for any counselor educator is just time and being able to manage your time. And so my calendar is so important. I schedule my research time. And I think that would be the thing if you ask me how to be successful as a researcher, it's making sure that you schedule that research and writing time too. Okay, so the job search process, wow, that was a few years ago now, or 9 years ago to be exact. I worked 1 year at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and have been at UF now. I just finished my 8th year. And so thinking about being a doc student, that's a long ways back to think about. But I think I probably started the job search process probably early fall of my last year in the doc program. But I would say that the job search process now, I think, is different than it used to be. Job postings are coming out a lot earlier than they were when I was looking for a job. So I would actually really encourage doc students to be alert to that process as early as summer of their final year in the doc program. And I think even looking sooner than that, just to be aware of what's out there and what do job ads look like and how to prepare for that process. So I don't think it's too early to start looking at that process. As far as how I went about looking for jobs, I think that has changed a little bit now too. The Chronicle and higher ed jobs were really big when I was looking for a job. And they're still there, and I still think that's an opportunity for students to look for jobs. But I think CESNET is really, really huge now. And it was too when I was looking for a job, just not I think the primary source as it is now. And so I think nearly all, counselor ed positions come out on CESNET, and so I think that is like the source that students really need to be aware of as far as looking for jobs. So regarding SACES and ACES career connections, I think that was relatively new when I was a doc student. However, it was there, and so I did participate in that. I think it's like a preliminary screening process both for the university and for students. But I would encourage students to be a part of that, take advantage of that. I think it's a great way to start getting familiar with the interview process and just getting more comfortable with that and helping ease some of the anxiety related to that. One other thing I'd want to add about SACES and ACES is that sometimes, in addition to career connections, it's those informal meetings. There have been multiple times where I have been at ACES or SACES and we had a position open at UF, and a faculty member that I know at another institution brought their doc student up to me to introduce me to them, and then we had a conversation. And vice versa. I have taken some of my doc students and introduced them to counselor educators that I knew had positions and helped facilitate that conversation. So I think that happens a lot at ACES and SACES as well. I was hoping to get a job at a place where I could do research, but when I applied everywhere. I want to say one other thing about putting your CV and your applying everywhere. I think it's also important to remember that not to apply places that you wouldn't see yourself going to. Because that's a waste of your time and a waste of the time of the university. So how did I prepare for interviews? Well, I think there's multiple parts to that. Places that I applied typically had like a phone or a Skype interview. Now probably more commonly Zoom. And there was also the on-campus interview. We're preparing for those two types of interviews are really different. The Skype or the phone interview, how I prepared for that. Well, one of the things I did is that if it was a phone interview, I went ahead and went online and I downloaded copies of all the pictures of people that I could find that were on the search committee. And I looked at them so I knew kind of who I was talking to. Because on the phone, there's no one, you're not seeing anybody. And so I think Zoom interviews for me, or the Skype interview, was much easier because I could actually see who I was talking to. So I also tried to get to know who I was, or get to know the background around the people that I was interviewing with. So I looked at their profiles, their faculty profiles, I looked at the things that they wrote about, their research interests, their teaching interests. So I sort of had some background information as much as I could find to prepare for that interview. I also practiced like interview questions, like I had really thought with intentionality about what my research interests were and my research goals for the next few years, what my teaching interests were, if I was asked to teach, like what my favorite classes would be, what classes I would want to teach, the service I was involved in. So really knowing the things on my CV and how I saw myself like wanting to be a counselor educator and sort of my trajectory over the next few years, what that would look like. But I also thought about examples. So if they asked me about my supervision and a challenging supervisee situation and how I addressed that, like how I would respond to that. The same thing for teaching and research and my challenges for research. So really trying to be prepared for a broad range of questions. I think for preparing for on-campus interview, it's so different. I think one of the basic things is making sure you get enough sleep before you go, because it's really exhausting. I remember my first campus interview, and there's people with you all the time, except when you're in your hotel room at night and you're sleeping. And so I remember going to my hotel room and kicking off my shoes and just being like, oh, I'm free. And really taking that time to sort of recharge. But I think, so making sure you can get as much sleep as you can, preparing for what you can prepare for, so possible questions they may ask you, making sure that you have clothes that are professional but also comfortable to be in for really long days, and making sure that, that your presentation is strong, and also remembering that you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because you want a good fit for you as well. So how do you cope with not getting a job offer that you've applied for? I think part of that is like any job that you apply for. Like if there are jobs that you're going to apply for and you're not going to get, and that could be many different reasons. And I think the biggest thing is to not take that personal, because there is so much involved to that process. Oftentimes it has nothing to do with you. It could be fit. Like you were great. You had a great interview and they really liked you, but someone else was just a slightly better fit. And so those are things that you just don't know about. And you probably won't ever know. But knowing, just not taking it personal. And that there is a position out there for you, there's a good fit, and to not give up. I think one of the challenges is, one of the basic challenges is just living in a different place. You don't know where, you have to find even basics, like find a grocery store that you like, find a place to live, find a doctor that you like. All of those basic things, I think are a transition. If you have a family, finding school for your kids and finding places that you like to go, the park where your kids can play. All of those things, I think, are part of that transition. And then there's the job transition. And because all of those transitions happen, when you're first moving, I actually really encourage students to not take a course release. If they have a course release in their first year, to actually not take it until their second semester instead of their first semester. I think another part of the transition is just not being in student role. And yet still being a little intimidated, or maybe a lot intimidated, because you're the new kid on the block. And it's kind of like when you go from, I think, elementary school to middle school, or middle school to high school. Like, everyone's older than you and everyone's more experienced than you, and they know where everything is and they know what they should do and not do, and you don't know any of those things. And I think the way to handle that is finding someone that you can trust on the faculty to really be your mentor. A lot of universities now have a mentor program set up. And it's great to have a formal mentor, but it's also great to have an informal mentor. Just someone that you can go to and be like, hey, this happened, or I got this question for you, or I don't know what to do about this. And you can really just feel comfortable with and can be candid about. I also think what is really great and what really helped me is having strong mentorship in my doc program that I could still rely on. So I called my chair, I emailed my chair during my first year, and even in my first couple of years. And I said, this has come up, or I'm experiencing this, what do I do? And he was just a really great support for me during that process. So tenure and promotion, that really depends on your university. When you go to a university, you want to ask that question to your department head or your school director. We have schools here. I think you want to ask your dean that question, and ask other faculty that are in your program, but also talk to faculty that have recently been promoted or recently received tenure, earned tenure. And that gives you kind of a judge of that. For me, I tried to protect my research time as much as I could, because I knew that would be the one thing that would be highest valued at a research institution. And also, I was also told that I needed to try to pursue external funding. And so for me to be successful in trying to get tenure and promotion, I actually wrote on my calendar times that I was going to be writing. Just like I would schedule meetings, just like I schedule class, you book those times and you section them off on your calendars. And I recommend, if research is part of your expectation, that you also schedule that. And also don't tell people that's what you're scheduling that time for. Because I found that if I told someone, I can't meet during this time because that's my research time, the answer that sometimes I got was, you can move your research time to some other time. And if you get in the habit of doing that, you'll never do research. You'll just always be moving it to some other time, and then that'll be moved to another time too. So I think it's really important that you schedule, just like you would a meeting or just like you would a class, you schedule your research time and your writing time, and you protect that time. And so I got in the habit of doing that. I also think it's really important that to be successful in writing, that you don't write in a silo. And so writing with colleagues, writing with students, I think is a really good way to be successful. You need to have some publications where you're the first author. You need to have some publications where you're the sole author or only author, but not all of your publications you need to be the first author or sole author. I also think getting your dissertation early for publication. First article I got out as soon as I could. Because it's something that's basically ready. I mean, you need to cut it down. I mean, if it's traditional dissertation, and I did, and I actually had to collect some more data to get it published. But I worked on that right away because it was something I could. And you don't want your dissertation to get old, because then you have to do the lit review all over again. And you've already spent like tons of time doing that, so you don't have to do that again. I have one more thing I want to add about the tenure and promotion process, and that is, be really careful about how much time you spend on service. I am very involved in organizations, and I love the service part of being a counselor educator. I love that part of being a counselor. I love going to conferences and presenting. I love being in leadership in organizations, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I would also say that that takes up a lot of time. And so just be mindful of what service you do. And then I think also another way to be successful for tenure and promotion is make sure things are congruent with each other instead of separate. And so the organizations that I'm really involved in are also connected with my research interests. And that's also connected with the classes that I teach. For instance, I've done research on the classes that I've taught, and I presented on those topics at conferences. And so all of those things are done together instead of, I'm going to present on this as a conference and I'm not going to do anything else with it. Or I'm going to submit a proposal for this conference for a research poster on a study that I'm doing, and that's going to serve as motivation to get the study done because I need the data to be able to present at the conference. So really seeing things as working together instead of seeing them as separate. So this one's a tough one. I'll be honest, I don't always do very well at this. You have to be able to set like your boundaries because no one else is gonna set them for you. I know for some people, they come to the office every day because their kids go to work, or their kids go to school, sorry. And so when their kids are in school, they come to the office. For me, I like to stay at home a couple of days a week and write if I'm trying to do research that week, because for me coming in the office, I can't easily write in the office. So you have to figure out what works for you regarding that. But if you set boundaries around emails, people will understand those boundaries and will get used to that. It's taking time for things that are important to you. And work is important, but work is not the only thing. And so what fills you up? If your family fills you up, making time for that. If you like to be outside, then making time for that. If you like to read, like personal reading, not like article reading or scholarly reading, then you make time for that. And again, putting that on your calendar, just like you would meetings, just like you would class, just like you would research time, putting your personal time on your calendar. And I think it's also important to take time to unplug. And so turning off the computer, turning off your email on your phone, and figuring out again what works best for you regarding that. I think relationships are so important. And one of the things when I looked for jobs and I was deciding, if a place offered me a job, if that was the right place for me, a big factor in that was relationships. And I think, and I share this with students, and yet it's hard to explain, but it just happens. And I think as counselors, we have, that gut feeling sometimes, or that gut reaction. And when you go for an interview, you just know if that's the right place. Like there's something about those relationships in addition to everything else that makes it just a good fit. And so I think having relationships with your colleagues is so important because you're going to spend a lot of time with your colleagues. I remember when I was a new faculty member here and was working towards tenure and promotion, there was a group of us, and a couple of us in my program, but also some that were in another program. And we all tried to go out to lunch at least once and just kind of support each other, vent if we need to vent, those type of things. And so I think that's important that you make time for those things, making time for those relationships. I would also say that the staff are really, really important, that you have good relationships with them. If you're nice to people, I think then people are nice to you. And so I think you want to form those relationships with not just your faculty colleagues, but other people that are around you. So what do I wish I would have done differently? I think, to be honest, if I was going to do anything different in my doc program, I think I would have had more fun. I had a graduate assistantship, and then I also worked at in a mental health agency while I was doing my doc program. And so I spent a lot of time studying and writing and working, and not as much time for fun. And life's just too short not to have fun. And like going back to that work-life balance, it's important that that you're being productive, that you're writing as a doc student, that you're going to conferences, that you're getting teaching experience and supervision experience and all of those things. But it's also important that you take care of yourself because you'll never have that time back. Take advantage of opportunities that you're offered as a doc student and make things happen that you want to have happen. And so oftentimes faculty are going to come ask you, hey, I'm doing this, do you want to be involved? Sometimes they may, but if they don't take it personal. Go ask them. Like, I heard you're doing this really cool research study and I want to be involved. Or I didn't get my presentation accepted at this conference. Did you get a presentation accepted? Can I present with you? Doing that with faculty, but also doing that with your fellow students, because you need to make opportunities happen for yourself. You need to get out of the experience what you want to get out of the experience. And so being aware of that, reflecting on that, and then taking steps to make that happen, which is not always easy, but I think really important. Okay, so what do I look for in colleagues and counselor educators? I think we talked about that some, but I've now been on several search committees and I've chaired a couple of search committees. And I think, to be honest, one of the biggest things that we look for is someone that's going to make a good colleague. And so I think someone that's collegial, someone that wants to work as a team player, those are really important for things that we look at as a faculty member. I also think someone that's balanced, maybe someone that has a strong research agenda and someone that is interested in continuing to do research and also explore and try to secure external funding. Also someone that's a good teacher. Also someone I think that's authentic. And so when you go for a job interview, you want to be yourself. You are who you are, and that you're not trying to be someone else. It's such a privilege to be a counselor educator. I love being a counselor educator. There are challenges with my job. There are parts about my job that I do not like. But more than not, there are parts of my job that I love. And the thing I want to leave you with is, be yourself. Put yourself out there for opportunities. I know that's hard, especially if you're an introvert, but try to do that and enjoy it. Enjoy your experiences as being a doc student and as a counselor educator, because there are lots of fun parts about being a counselor educator. Oh, and also, if you have any questions for me or you want to talk with me about something, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always willing and open to talk with doc students and to help mentor them or answer questions. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk more about anything that I talked about or ask me a question.